whoever recites the Quran and memorizes it and abides by what is halal in it, what is lawful in it as lawful, and abstains from what it deems haram, what it deems unlawful, Allah will admit him into paradise due to it and grant him shafa'ah, grant him intercession for 10 of his family members. So here you have the reward of the Quran in its recitation and its application. And that's important because the Quran is not just to be memorized, but it's also to be applied. And the more that a person does both, the more honor they're going to find from it on the Day of Judgment for themselves and for their parents or anyone else who taught them the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man qara'a al-Qur'ana wa 'amila bima fihi." Whoever recites the Quran and acts in accordance with what is in it, his parents will be crowned on the Day of Resurrection with a light that is brighter than the light of the sun in your worldly homes. Then we start to find the Prophet ﷺ talking about how particular surahs benefit you in the station. Okay? So he said, recite the Quran, for on the Day of Resurrection it will come as an intercessor for its reciters. Then he said, اقرأوا الزهروين البقرة وسورة آل عمران. Recite the two brightly illuminated chapters, Surah Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran. And he said, فَإِنَّهُمَا تَأْتِيَانِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ كَأَنَّهُمَا غَمَامَتَانِ أَوْ غَيَايَتَانِ أَوْ فِرْقَانِ مِنْ طَيْرٍ. He said, for on the Day of Resurrection, they will come as if they were two clouds or two shades or two flocks of birds. تُحَاجَانِ عَنْ أَصْحَابِهِمَا. And they will be arguing on behalf of their companions. The scholar said, think of when Suleiman alayhi salam used to walk in this world with his kingdom and how everyone used to admire how it was all at his disposal. Now imagine a person walking on the Day of Judgment and Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran are like two canopies, two flocks of birds, two clouds that are following you and that everyone is admiring and wishing they had done so as well, wishing they had committed those surahs to their memory and acted upon them as well. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, اقرأوا سورة البقرة فإن أخذها بركة وتركها حسرة ولا تستطيعها البطلة. He said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, recite Surah Al-Baqarah. For doing so produces blessing in this life, and abandoning it produces regret in the next life. And وَلَا تَسْتَطِيعُهَا الْبَطَلَ can mean that the lazy are unable to recite it or that sorcerers are unable to penetrate it. The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned some of these other short portions that we recite on a daily basis. He once heard a man reciting قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, Surah Al-Ikhlas. And the Prophet ﷺ responded and he said, وَجَبَتْ, وَجَبَتْ, وَجَبَتْ. It has become mandatory. And they asked the Prophet ﷺ what he was speaking about. He said, Jannah has become mandatory for that person by their recitation of قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Something so simple. But paradise is mandatory for the one who knows and who commits to Surah Al-Ikhlas. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. In another authentic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever recites Ayatul Kursi, Allahu la ilaha illahu, after every one of the prescribed prayers, the Prophet ﷺ said, لَمْ يَمْنَعْهُ مِنْ دُخُولِ الْجَنَّةِ إِلَّا أَنْ يَمُوتِ. Nothing is standing between him and his entrance into paradise except for death. Meaning it is guaranteed for him at that point that he's going to enter into Jannah. So we've covered Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, and then Al-Ikhlas and Ayatul Kursi. Now there is one more companion, and this is what the scholars say is the persistent intercessor. And it is known as the surah that is Al-Mani'ah, the preventer, and it's also Al-Munjiyah, the rescuer. And that is Surah Al-Mulk. The surah that the Prophet ﷺ said that the one who recites it every night will be protected from the punishment of the grave. And some of the scholars said it prevents one from doing the deeds that warrant the punishment of the grave. And its virtue and its recitation itself prevents the punishment of the grave. It is such a beautiful and powerful surah. So much so that the Prophet ﷺ said in another narration, Suratun min al-Quran, 30 ayah, tashfa'u li sahibiha. That there are 30 verses, one surah in the Quran, that will show up on the Day of Judgment. 30 verses, and will intercede on behalf of its companion. One narration he said, خَاصَمَتْ لِصَاحِبِهَا. It will continue to argue on behalf of its companion حَتَّى يُغْفَرَ لَهُ, until that person is certainly forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ said that is تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكِ, Surah Al-Mulk, with its 30 verses, showing up on the Day of Judgment, arguing on your behalf, saying, Ya Allah, forgive him. Ya Allah, protect him from the punishment. Ya Allah, enter this person into Jannah. And subhanAllah, in that surah, what do you find? It's full of the remembrance of death and the hereafter. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَيْبِ لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَأَجْرٌ كَبِيرٌ. Surely for those who have awe of their Lord without seeing him, there's forgiveness and a mighty reward. And so this Quran, as much as it is shifa, it's a healing in this life, it's so much more for you in the next.